And now, the survival show that once survived using performance-enhancing drugs to club a moose to death with a fifth appendage. In this Season 7 premiere, we sit down with Joey King, Bitcoin blogger and developer. He's going to unravel, wind up, and tell us all about cryptocurrency and the fate of money as we know it. Howdy and welcome to the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 220. I'm your host, Aaron, and you, roving horde, are back in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Joey, myself and the listeners have a mutual friend, someone who is a co-host of this show, currently on baby hiatus and an indeterminate amount of time. Joey and I know him in the real world as Jonathan. Listeners know him simply as Jonathan. And now that we all know the sort of shady characters you hang out with, Joey, is this how you buy your drugs and child slave labor?
So me personally, if I were to purchase those things, it'd certainly be something I would consider using.
Yes.
And it's something you can buy a lot of things with. And I also think, if you can't buy anything with it, it's not really money. So right now, a lot of those things are bought with the U.S. dollar. People use the U.S. dollar for money, but there's increasingly things you can't buy with the U.S. dollar. So it's losing, I'd say, a bit of its moneyness to things like Bitcoin, like silver, like gold.
Oh, see, that's interesting. And God, there's so many different directions I want to take this. I feel like a kid in a candy store racing around with this topic. This was something that way long time ago that Jonathan and I actually talked about, and then we never really brought it up again. It's been years now on the show, and I think really it was just because I think we had said all that we felt comfortable saying about it at the time, and we're ourselves very early adopters. So, gosh, where to even start with this? So as far as, you brought up an interesting thing when we were getting ready that, you have the bitesofman.com is your website, and you work for bitcoin.com, and you said that was a political divide. And I guess let's start real quickly there so that we can kind of get a sense of you and everything else. How is that a political divide?
Oh, wow. I mean, this is a really advanced starting point. I might have to rewind it a little bit. Especially now, we're talking, it's July 26th. I'll put that on there, when this podcast goes out. There's an enormous scaling debate going on in Bitcoin that's been raging for more than a year. And it's finally coming to some decisive action on August 1st, some of the following month. So even between when we're having this conversation and when some of these moves are made, there's going to be a lot of changes. So we'll have to rewind a little bit about what those divides are and how that could be and then where I'm at. Maybe we can get started.
We'll get started somewhere else. I think that was an interesting kind of hook to get us going, though. So let's start at the beginning. Why were you drawn to cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I got into Bitcoin when I was living overseas. So I'm an American, and I was working in Canada at the time. And I was also, getting into my late 20s. So you start to have some more adult financial situations. Financial, it's not like problems, but, if you want to buy a car or pay rent in a foreign country, and you're just starting to earn money in that country, well, now you got to move some U.S. dollars to Canada. And you think to yourself, oh, well, I'm in a very modern banking system. I'm just going to take this money and move it over here. And certainly that's not going to be that bad, but that's not how it works, right? Yeah. It takes, unless you're a big institutional customer, like if you're just, some guy in his 20s, it's going to be $75 wire transfer fee. Your money is just going to sort of disappear for a week. You're going to get whatever exchange rate that they decide to give you. I had to send faxes to make sure that this wire transfer went through, and then call people and be like, where's the significant chunk of change? And you realize, wow, it almost would have been better if they had just put some bars of gold onto a Conestoga wagon and just, put the horses up there. At least know where they were or what was going on. And, that it was actually resources. So that was pretty eye-opening for me, just dealing with that banking situation. And when I moved back from Canada, and that was around 2014, I said, I'm never doing that again. And I just put it all into Bitcoin and didn't look back. When I say all, I mean, I converted that car into Bitcoin.
Oh,
and
okay.
started studying the technology more, studying the currency more, and just how much more pleasant it was owning my own money and feeling like I was in control. Not trusting these banks as third parties and custodians of my money, especially with everything that they've been up to. In the same time frame since 2008, really. Since 1929, since 1971, since all sorts of other banking landmarks. It
Hmm.
was a lot reassuring for me to have capital and really a bearer instrument that's I can do whatever I want with it. I can move it wherever I want. It's been way better than just an inflation hedge. Although at the time I got into it, I was like, well, yeah, this will be a good inflation hedge. Bitcoin in 2015, some of the worst years for Bitcoin, but it was around 400 bucks at the time. And now you're looking at around $2,500. So probably a little bit more than inflation, although I do also believe inflation is higher than they're telling us it is. So
Well, yeah, yeah. To start to go even further back, totally understand your attraction to it. And we keep talking about Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is part of a larger concept, I guess. So, in simple terms, what is a cryptocurrency?
the way I think about it is, Bitcoin is the first implementation of digital scarcity. And the innovation is digital scarcity. You go back and you look, there's lots of problems that are solved by digital abundance, and that you can send an MP3 across the world quite easily, or you can store thousands of your photos on the internet for almost no money. Digital things are quite abundant and very easy to copy. At the same time, if you have that abundance, it makes them really bad at being money. So even though we've had the internet and we've had the ability to communicate, money is just another form of human communication.
Mm,
We haven't had the ability to transact, at least not without going through trusted third parties on the internet. And there's lots of technical computer sciencey ways to talk about this, but what's really
right.
happened with Bitcoin is it's just solved that problem. It's implemented scarcity in a digital way where it's a bearer instrument and you're not relying on any trusted third parties. So digital scarcity, I think, is the innovation, and like that's cryptocurrencies are all parts of that digital scarcity space. Um, Bitcoin as the first mover and the innovator of digital scarcity, I think will continue to play a dominant position, although that's not necessarily guaranteed. And that's just because I think cryptocurrencies are built on such a complicated tree of stakeholders and incentives, and that tree kind of has to grow empirically. It has to rely on experience. I don't, Bitcoin was designed, but I don't think any human's really smart enough to say, oh, this will work exactly this way.
Right.
These billions of humans and these miners and these stakeholders and these governments are going to love this. It's going to be better money than the Federal Reserve because I've designed it that way. On the one hand, yeah, that makes it really easy to design something that's better than the US dollar. But on the other hand, its value is that it's constantly being empirically tested. It's being used every day. It's being mined every day. People are transacting with it every day. And Bitcoin now has been doing that for 8 years. So a lot of these other cryptocurrencies, if they're trying to carve out a niche for themselves in that digital scarcity space, if you're starting today and you have some technical capabilities that make you meaningfully different from Bitcoin, you need to wait until 2025 until you actually have the same level of empirical experimental results that
Hmm.
Bitcoin has today. That's baked into the value of Bitcoin. So the first mover advantage is very important. I
Hmm.
think Bitcoin has it. There's a lot of debate on to what extent is Bitcoin threatened. Is there going to be some sort of other cryptocurrency overtaking Bitcoin? And those are risks. But fundamentally, once you have that much value stored in a system, now you have also that much value protecting its investment, and you know what's worked and
Hmm.
what hasn't worked.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with that is it's in much ways it's just like any of the modern currencies. Well, they're not the really. I wouldn't call them modern currencies, but current currencies that we use. I mean, do you use the pound? Do you use the dollar? Where do you hold your money?
Mm.
And I guess to sort of do an analog for what we're talking about here. So is it Bitcoin or is it Ether? And I think one of the other interesting parts is the ability of how quickly you can or convert one to another.
Mhm.
I think for the layperson, it seems rather complicated, but what isn't complicated before you first start messing with it. And I think some of this is cleared up, but as we were joking about in the very beginning about, you buying child slave labor, why do so many people think that Bitcoin is bad or evil or this nefarious thing? I mean, is it pure ignorance? Is it just the media's salivating over every time there's some sort of incident like the issues that went on with Silk Road, or people being able to somehow magically it's more mysterious that they can buy drugs with Bitcoin than it is to take a $10 bill down the street and buy a rock of crack? Why do so many people think that Bitcoin is this scary thing?
Yeah, I think part of it is just that it's money.
Hmm.
And, people view money very differently than other technologies. Mark Andreessen was on a podcast with Tim Ferriss and got asked a similar question. And he was talking about, yeah, like if you make a new, better toaster and you show it to somebody, they're like, yeah, nice toaster, man. But if you make like a new, better money, people are like, you're scamming me. Like this is
Yeah.
some sort of trap. Like, what, are you crazy? And part of that's just, humans and emotions. And part of it too, we're now at two whole generations almost that have only known a form of money that is digital and not scarce in terms of like the US dollar and then the British pound. But there haven't really been too many obvious consequences of that, right? So
Hmm.
we've had 5,000 years, give or take, of human history, and we've had like 50 years of non-gold backed paper money, and we haven't really seen like a Weimar hyperinflation. People in Argentina and Venezuela certainly understand the appeal of
Yeah.
Bitcoin a lot more intuitively than people in, say, the United States or Canada. But you're starting to see this happen in major economies now. We had Greece and their ongoing monetary crisis. We had Cyprus and their ongoing monetary crisis. And Bitcoin offers some protection against that, but at the same time, people know that money is a risk. It's where they choose to store their value, and Bitcoin is by no means proof against fraud and scams. Like there are a lot of scammers in the Bitcoin space. It is easy to lose your money if you put it into Bitcoin.
Hmm.
Uh, More and more people I talk to now at Bitcoin meetups are like, "Yeah, Bitcoin's great, but I'm really into this. Insert scam here." So people should be wary about how they store their money and do their homework. And Bitcoin is a bit scary. At
Mm.
the same time, the media message and that negative rhetoric, it's just much easier to sell that message because people are very emotional about their money.
Mm.
And also, I think a little bit more nefariously, because Bitcoin really is a threat to the status quo and our current system of debt-based money. And you have situations right now where central banks are talking about negative interest rates. We already have negative interest rates in Europe. If you want control over people's money, you're not going to be having media outlets push how great Bitcoin is. It's going to
Mhm.
be much better to, subtly go for your whole war on cash. You're already having other papers coming out, studies coming out, being like, oh, yeah, the $100 bill is causing all these problems. We need to get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bitcoin's a bit caught up in that. And again, I'm not saying there's like, oh, overwhelming control of the news media from like these interests, but there are people with an incentive to keep control over debt-based money.
Mhm.
It allows certain people to create as much money as they want and use it for whatever they want. And Bitcoin is the check on that. It's really, could potentially just replace the Federal Reserve. And it's the first technology ever that gives people a choice. You could first time ever just opt out of the Federal Reserve, which is not something U.S. citizens or any citizens in the world have been able to do before
Mhm.
with dollar as the world reserve currency.
There's a lot of scary stuff around Bitcoin for people who aren't completely aware of it, and that's interesting about the scams. What are some of those examples of scams that are running around out there?
One of the biggest ones right now is called OneCoin. I think it's out of Bulgaria, or they have some videos out of Thailand. But they're just kind of going around and drumming up some support and saying, hey, Bitcoin, look at all these people who made a bunch of money. We have this new, better thing called OneCoin that doesn't have any of the problems. But it's not really a cryptocurrency. It's just you kind of sign up like you're signing up for a Gmail account,
Mm.
and you log in and you send them some money. And like it's a bank account, they show you a number on the screen and say, this is how much you have and this is how much it's worth. But it's just a Ponzi scheme. So if you're then trying to take out that money, or they say, oh, you have 10 times more, and you're like, oh, great, like I'll sell it for some US dollars, they'll be like, why would you do that? You got one coin, man. Just keep the one coin. It's worth a lot more money. And there's lots of these sort of centralized Ponzi scams going around that are really preying on people who, learn about Bitcoin, learn about cryptocurrencies, but really only hear about it because of the price and because of the speculative interest. And the first thing, and it's very human, they say, "Oh, well, I missed that boat. Like, what's the next one?"
Mm,
And they're sort of open for this. So I've met a lot of people in meetups who swear by stuff like OneCoin.
hmm.
They're like, "Oh, Bitcoin is great, but there's this service where you can invest your Bitcoins and they give you 3% interest per day on your Bitcoins." And I'm like, "Interesting." And it's just, a JavaScript bot where you send them Bitcoin, they cash it, and they just show you a number that gets bigger, and you'll never get that Bitcoin back.
Wow.
So it is
Yeah.
money, and that's sort of, to me, one of the biggest indicators that it's money, right? If Bitcoin wasn't valuable, nobody would be trying to steal it.
That's a good
There's
way of putting
so
it.
much interest in stealing money. It says a lot.
Hmm. To take the conversation to a more practical place for just a little bit, I think one of the most confusing things, confusing as hell for me in the very beginning, was wallets. And I did it in a very weird backwards way of I was like, "Ooh, this Bitcoin thing's neat," as somebody who's a sort of an anarchist, more of a Jeffersonian anarchist. To me, it was like, "Oh, this is amazing. How do I help? How do I get involved?" And so I went out and got a miner, and then it was like, "Oh shit, I need a wallet. What the hell do I do?" From a very practical sense, how do you, because there are a few different ways, I guess, of storing your Bitcoin. How does that work?
It is very complicated, and you hear people in the Bitcoin space all the time. They're like, "Oh, you have to hold your own keys," and you say, "Well, what the hell are you talking about?"
Hmm.
Um, okay, like, yeah, they're right. It's important to hold your own keys. And what that actually means is, you're having a Bitcoin wallet. I think the easiest way to think of a Bitcoin wallet is like your email account, right? I'm Joey at bytesofman.com. You could send me an email. You know who I am, and you know that I'll get that email, but you can't log into my account and check my email. You would need the password for that. But I have the password, so I can log in and I can check my email, and I can send email from that account. With Bitcoin, instead of email addresses, you have a Bitcoin address. And your Bitcoin address is where you can receive Bitcoin. You can send it to people, then they can send you Bitcoin to that address and you can receive it. But only you can spend that Bitcoin because you have private key to that address. So the private key is sort of like the password to your Gmail account. And as long as you hold that private key, it means you control the Bitcoin in that wallet. And what that means too, in terms of how you implement that, there's lots of wallets you can download. They're just apps on your phone. There's some of them are web based, or it's a program you can download on your computer. And there's also hardware wallets. I've got a Trezors,
Hmm.
and that's just a device that's storing the private key on the device in a way that it's never touching the internet. So
So why would you do that for the layperson?
security.
Mm.
So, Gmail, they probably only store like a hash of your password or whatever, but like somebody could fire up a laptop anywhere in the world and try to hack into your Gmail account. And if they get your password right, they have access to your entire account. And similar with a Bitcoin wallet, if you have just the Bitcoin account, somebody wrote a blog post on Medium about how they lost about $8,000 from their Coinbase account. And that's because their Coinbase account just has a username and a password.
Hmm.
And if you don't have two-factor authentication, like somebody could just hack into your email account, reset your password, and boom, they're into your Coinbase account, which is centralized. They have the keys, and access to the keys is just by a password.
Hmm.
So if the hacker gets that password, they immediately have all the money. And if you think, even the most successful bank robber today is not going to get 8 grand out of the local Chase branch,
Yes.
but the most sophisticated hacker in Romania might get 100 Coinbase passwords and get, 1 to 8 grand per password. So,
Mm.
and the more Bitcoin is worth, again, the greater the prize is now for
Hmm.
stealing those passwords and hacking into those accounts. So
Yeah.
if you're storing really any amount of Bitcoin, you want to hold your own keys, which means you want your own wallet that's not hosted by a third party and accessible by only a username and password. And if you're storing any, significant amounts, you really want a hardware wallet, which means the private key has a whole nother layer of protection that it never even touches the internet. It's only on a device, and you just have to plug in a device to send your transactions.
So how does that work? Like you're trying to transact in Bitcoin and you've got money on a hardware wallet. How does it go off the hardware wallet and into the other person's hands?
Sure, it's a software interface, so it's still not terribly user friendly,
Hmm.
but just a couple of hours, you'll get it no problem. It's interacting like any other software program, or even like with Gmail. You click send an email in Gmail, and you type your email and you send it. And with a wallet, you'll click send, and it'll ask you, where. You put in a Bitcoin address, and it'll ask you how much, and you'll put in how much, either in US dollars or Bitcoin or any currency. Most wallets will automatically convert it for you.
Hmm.
And then you hit send, and it'll send. And if you want to receive with the wallet, same thing. You click
Uh-huh.
receive, show you your address. You can share that address. You can email it to somebody. You can take a picture of a QR code and send it to somebody, and then they would just send that address. So it's very, very similar to sending an email or sending a WhatsApp message.
Hmm.
The user experience isn't that bad. The only difference is if you make a mistake, you might lose a lot of money. So you do need to be careful, and you should use wallets that have been around for a while and
Hmm.
have a lot of users, and preferably years of nobody being hacked.
See, now that's interesting, and I think it's funny. That was one of my biggest reservations. Not reservations, I guess, so much as more of thinking, hey, this is really cool, but it's just not there yet. My whole thing was until my mom, who has trouble with the send button on her email, can use Bitcoin. Until that day, like it's just not user friendly enough. And I think that's one of the things I've continually run into is it's fun to mine Bitcoin, it's fun to hold Bitcoin, it's fun to watch it go up and down. And to me, that's exciting and fun. But as far as using it, I think it's still I think it's becoming easier, but it's just so not user friendly. At least it wasn't the last time I checked it. I haven't even opened my wallet in probably the last year. So, and I guess that's the thing is how fast is it evolving would be my next question for you.
Not fast enough.
Mhm.
It is more user friendly today than it was, say, a year ago, but I'd say trivially so.
Mhm.
Uh, it's been bogged down in some other debates. People have been trying to solve some different problems with it. In terms of like your grandmother using it, like absolutely not. Just a normal human who's has basic computer literacy would be hard pressed to use it, at least in a responsible way, without spending some time and trying to get to know how to use it. So that's still a big growth opportunity. But at the same time, what the ultimate goal is like a grandmother can use Facebook right now, and they don't even know that they're using the internet, right? They're like, oh, I'm just using Facebook.
Yeah, it's kind of like when people thought AOL was the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Bitcoin, it's being engineered as a protocol. It's
Mhm.
being engineered for other apps and tools and services to just live on top of Bitcoin. None of them exist yet that are that user friendly in the way that a Facebook user, your grandmother, doesn't know she's using TCP/IP.
Mhm.
Uh, but that's the ultimate vision for Bitcoin. So while yes, it's worrying, at the same time, that also presents a lot of opportunity, right? I mean, that's why I think one of the reasons Bitcoin continues to be relatively undervalued compared to other global value storage mechanisms.
You brought up the it sounds like some more fundamental issues that and political internal I guess camps that are developing around Bitcoin and everything else. And we also sort of alluded to it in the very beginning and promised we'd come back to it. So to close that open loop, what is going on with Bitcoin?
Okay, so again, like a lot of this changes day to day. So what I say right now is probably not going to be the same a week from now, definitely not 2 weeks from now.
Hmm.
But over the last couple of years, there's been a big debate on the best way to scale Bitcoin to make sure that the network can support the greatest number of users. And that's divided into two main camps. And again, I think that's an interesting sort of case study in human psychology that you always seem to have these two sides and people just sort of pick their allies and then go with whatever. But one of those camps said, okay, the best way to scale Bitcoin is to increase this parameter called the block size, which I don't want to get into the whole thing, but essentially just saying, hey, let's have bigger, more transactions stored on the blockchain every day. Right now, you can only have 1 meg per block, and a block's every 10 minutes or so. So there's a size limit to how many transactions can actually be on the blockchain every day.
Okay.
One group is saying just raise that size limit. And there's another group saying, like, well, no, there's risks to that. And there are risks to that. One group is saying the risk of changing that parameter is too great. It's bigger than the risk of not onboarding more users because of high transaction fees. And again, like I'm getting into other dimensions. If two people want to use Bitcoin and do Bitcoin transactions, but there's not enough block space for that many transactions, it becomes a competitive bid. So if you want to send a Bitcoin transaction, you have to send it with a higher fee than somebody else.
Oh,
And
interesting. Okay.
a few months ago, or I guess really the first half of this year, fees were anywhere from $1 to $5
Mm.
for just a typical transaction. Now, that's fine if you're trying to send $1 million to your friend in Belize. Who cares? That's still the best way to do it.
Hmm.
You're trying to buy something for $5 or $10, and this is going to be a $1 to $5 fee. That's not a great solution. And with Bitcoin too, there's going to be 21 million units of BTC with 8 decimal places, and if fees get high enough, you render some of those decimal places useless, right? You're
Yeah.
saying that you can only make transactions of a certain size, and so one group said, "Hey, that's a really big risk, and even though there are risks to increasing this block size, the risks of people not joining Bitcoin are larger." And another group said, no, we got to do everything we can to make sure that the blockchain doesn't get that much bigger or that much faster. And their scaling solution involved reorganizing some transactions and how memory is stored on the network, which solves some other problems as well with Bitcoin development. And then it just became this big sort of war of words. Which way are we going to go? Increase this block size, which people have been asking for since 2014, 2015, or are we going to hold the block size there, roll out this other solution, and then what's the mechanism for doing that when people disagree? You have all of these different stakeholders. It's also just money and humans, so people are going to disagree anyway. It's also money and humans, so the solution might not necessarily work or be the one that wins out because people just say, "Yeah, it's not for me." The fundamental issue with Bitcoin is that it's an empirical system. People have theories and ideas about how it can be optimized or how it can be improved, and what people say about Bitcoin is Bitcoin doesn't really care about people's ideas or their theories. It's this sort of emergent thing that will chew up and spit out any ideas that don't actually work with the stakeholders. So you see it on the human level, and it looks like a bunch of people arguing and posturing. But in reality, like Bitcoin is an open source software.
Hmm.
Like anybody could change it. And the word that I use is fork, which means just copy the software and kind of go in your own direction. Which I'm oversimplifying there. A lot of Bitcoin people will be mad at me for that description. But the more people who are attempting to change it and actually test it in the real world, the more likely you are to have a sort of emergent leader. Market mechanisms will be deciding what the best idea is, not somebody who everybody thinks, oh, this guy's a genius. Like the problem is beyond the scope of human knowability if you're not actually testing it and running experiments. So both sides and camps have been sort of marshaling their resources and waiting for the best time to run their experiment. If you say, I want to increase the block size, but you do that maybe too early, or you do that without support of enough miners and hash power or other stakeholders, you might disappear really quick. And then the future of Bitcoin will be set from there on. Like your idea was tested and didn't work, it'd be really hard to bring it back.
Mm.
And the other side felt the same way, right? They're like, well, what if we push this, but none of the miners take it? And we all, so people have been waiting for opportune times.
Hmm.
And that's what's made it a propaganda war. And both sides, have accused the other of paralyzing Bitcoin by not changing it or blocking their idea. And that's just because those sides have a slight advantage to be gained if they can convince some stakeholders on the other side. So, before you pull the trigger and are actually running your experiment in the real world, it's an influence game, and people have been playing it, and it's been messy. Like
Hmm.
it's very difficult to imagine that these are like adults with jobs who are, ostensibly stewards of this $40 billion store of value. It's actually become quite childish. But today, finally, people are pulling those triggers. So
Hmm.
on August 1st, one group has said, hey, like we're forking off. Like we're just going to have a bigger block size on our protocol. And the other group has actually reached a compromise, to apply this fix, which is called SegWit, which reorganizes transactions in a way that you might not need to increase the block size. But their compromise is that, hey, we'll run this SegWit, but then we will also increase the block size from 1 meg to 2 meg sometime in November. So people have agreed to that. through, again, a complicated mechanism of miners signaling and people arguing and people meeting in person and shaking hands and who knows.
Hmm.
So after August 1st, that SegWit chain should be locked in, should be happening to Bitcoin as a scaling solution. However, another group has said, hey, like we're also just going to fork off. And it's called BCC Bitcoin Cash, and we'll just be raising the block size and not adopting SegWit. So you'll actually have this real live experiment
Hmm.
in the wild of these two software protocols working and these two tokens on tradable exchanges, and the market will determine which one it likes the best. And then you have, the next big milestone in November is when the SegWit chain has, agreed to increase the block size to 2 megs. And like, will that happen?
Hmm.
Or will the camp say, no, like we've got SegWit, we still have our technical reservations. And then what will that mean for the Bitcoin Cash chain and like people who feel like they wanted a bigger block size? You might have two relatively equally matched tokens sort of duking it out in the free market,
Hmm.
uh, which is worrying on one side if you own Bitcoin and you're like, oh, this might be bad. But I'm actually quite excited about it because I don't think people are smart enough to know which solution is better, and you need to subject it to those types of market forces to
Hmm.
figure it.
That's really neat. So what happens to our Bitcoins when all this forking happens, when this forking orgy of Bitcoin shenanigans happens?
Yeah, make sure you don't have Bitcoin on it.
We'll be back after this quick break. Things are pretty quiet in the gun community right now. There's no crazy laws coming out or big new calls for gun control. And gun owners like myself are feeling pretty safe and pretty good about things right now, pretty optimistic. But you never know when the next gun-grabbing bonanza is going to start driving prices sky high and inventories crazy low because every Tom, Dick, and Harry decides that's the moment they need a gun, right? Now, we're really big on skills over gear around here, but sometimes pieces of gear just can't be beaten. And that's where a gun fits into your preparedness plans. This usually brings up where to get the best deal with the least BS, because gun buying can be just a headache. You should try martinarmory.com. They were founded with a simple goal: to make buying a gun simple and affordable. And instead of carrying thousands of different guns, they only carry 25. This is kind of crazy, but it allows them to focus on providing the most popular guns on the market at the very lowest prices. Now, for a limited time, I2H listeners get a little something something extra. You get free shipping. Simply go to martinarmory.com, pick out a gun, and enter the promo code RABBITHOLE at checkout. Again, that's martinarmory.com. Enter the promo code RABBITHOLE at checkout. Listener, do you get at least $3 a month worth of value out of I2H? You should see what we do for the Roving Horde Armada members. Check it out today by visiting i2h.net. Members get access to episodes a day early, access to monthly virtual and in-person meetups in some areas, an invitation to the secret I2H Armada Facebook group so you can chat about survival all day long with like-minded people, access to every episode ever produced by I2H. That's right, all the way back to the beginning, including one that was never aired. And those are just a few things you get with your membership when you sign up and become part of the I2H Roving Horde by going to i2h.net. Again, that's i2h.net. What happens to our Bitcoins when all this forking happens, when this forking orgy of Bitcoin shenanigans happens?
Yeah, make sure you don't have Bitcoin on an exchange. If you have Bitcoin on a service like Coinbase, Coinbase has come out and said, hey, we're not supporting fork, which means that they're only liable to provide you with Bitcoin in one of the chains. If you have Bitcoin on your own wallet, a hardware wallet or a mobile wallet, and any fork happens to Bitcoin, in that instant, if you had 10 Bitcoin and then it forks into Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, you have 10.0 Bitcoin Cash and 10.0 Bitcoin. Even then, it's pretty complicated because you don't know how the network's going to shake out. Maybe one of those forks will have a technical problem. Maybe it'll disappear. The best thing to do is just not trade any Bitcoin until some sort of wallet app has come out that can split those coins for you. So this happened with Ethereum when it split into Ethereum and Ethereum Classic.
Hmm.
It only took about a week for a lot of major wallet providers to roll out a feature where they said, hey, we've noticed your wallet had 10 Ethereum. Now you have 10 Ethereum and 10 Ethereum Classic. Would you
Mm.
like us to split that for you? And for me, as the user, you just hit yes. And then you have two wallets, one with Ethereum and one with Ethereum Classic. The issue is that you really need to wait until one of these wallets is out and has been tested and you can read about it and you can know like thousands of people have done this without having their money stolen.
Yeah.
And then you can do it. And then you'll have Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. And then from there, whatever you want to do, right? Again, because there's so much antagonism on both sides, people now are threatening. They're like, well, I'm going to take all my Bitcoin Cash and sell it for Bitcoin to try to crash Bitcoin. Or I'm going to take all my Bitcoin and sell it for Bitcoin Cash to try to crash the,
Wow, that is childish.
well, yeah. But at the same time, like it's a bark and bite thing, right? You have something to gain if you can convince people that you'll act that way.
Hmm.
But when it's actually your skin in the game and you're like, I don't know how this is going to play out, I don't think a lot of people on either side are really going to be throwing that money away.
Yeah.
I think people will be sitting on the sidelines and talking of the big game on whatever side they're on. But people will be waiting and seeing what happens on the market. At the same time, there are some whales in Bitcoin and some very politically aligned whales, one side or the other. And what could it do if somebody sells, like 100,000 Bitcoin just the Bitcoin Cash,
Hmm.
some freely traded exchange, and doesn't give a shit that they're losing potentially a lot of money because they have some political or irrational reason that they want to do that.
Hmm.
And is there a diplomatic edge to be gained by convincing people maybe you're just that crazy, like I'm going to do it? So it's an exciting show,
Yeah.
but finally will be a show. People have just been posturing and threatening for such a long time, and now you do finally have like these solutions will exist in the wild, and maybe one or both, could be stillborn or go nowhere.
Hmm.
One will take over, or maybe one will end up, 20% or so of the market cap of the other. What's reassuring to me, though, is the one tangible example we have of this is Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, and when that fork happened, the combined market cap of Ethereum and Ethereum Classic was higher than the preceding market cap of Ethereum alone.
Oh, neat.
So it was creating wealth and creating value for a wider community. And that's what tends to happen in the free market. If you better serve more customers, you are creating more value and more wealth.
Hmm.
And I think that also will apply to cryptocurrencies. Now, it's incredibly complicated. I will keep saying I think it's beyond the scope of human knowability.
Yeah.
You need to subject this to market forces. But I'm optimistic. People now are saying, how are we going to build our idea? How are we going to best improve the way we think it should be improved? Whereas before they were just saying, no, you're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. And it wasn't even more sophisticated. It
Uh-huh.
really was shouting matches,
Yeah.
like internet trolls, and
Duty
there's still
head.
some of
Yeah.
that, but already today there's a lot less. People kind of know, all right, like the camps are finally armed, they're on the march. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Fun. Watch the fur fly. We brought it up a few times, and I think that's an interesting point because there are people who don't even realize like Bitcoin is not the end all of the cryptocurrency conversation. There is Ethereum, there's Dash, there's all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
When you start getting off into those worlds, how does that work? Like as far as like holding it with wallets, do you use the same wallet? Do you not use the same wallet? Are there how do you tell what alternate cryptocurrencies are even legitimate or not?
Yeah, and there's a lot of differences of opinion there. You
Mm,
have one side which call themselves the Bitcoin maximalists, who think there's only one true Bitcoin and everything else is a scam.
okay.
I don't think that's an accurate way of how reality is working out right now. But
Hmm.
it's not necessarily a bad heuristic because there are a lot of scams in the altcoin space. And Bitcoin has become a de facto reserve currency. So if you want to get into cryptocurrency and you don't want to do a lot of homework, Bitcoin is still probably your best bet. I
Mm,
do think a lot of value will be created in alternative cryptocurrencies and already has been created. Right now on a market cap basis, Bitcoin's hanging in at just under 50% of the total market cap of all cryptocurrencies. Now, the market cap of a lot of these, so-called altcoins, just coins that are not Bitcoin, can be inflated because they're traded at much lower volumes. So, if I roll out Joey coin and I make a trillion of them and sell you one, like, oh wow, there's market cap's a trillion of Joey coin. And you're seeing things like that happen with some of the smaller altcoins, which is why their volatility is much higher and why their market caps can be a bit overreported.
Hmm.
Today, though, there are some altcoins that have some real empirical experience and are traded pretty heavily. Ethereum, as you say, is a really great example of that. Personally, I love Ethereum. My only issue with it is I will always have sour grapes about it because I was around in Bitcoin for Ethereum's ICO. I could have invested 2 or 3 Bitcoin into that ICO, which at the time would have been like $1,000
Hmm.
and would make me a millionaire today had I just done it. But I looked at it and I was like, no, it's stupid. It's Bitcoin only.
Yeah.
So our cost to having that attitude.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I did get into, I have an amount of Ethereum. It's always going to be an amount that's too small and just enough to make me upset that I didn't make a bigger bet.
I feel
Uh,
that way about the fact that I spent my money on the miner and not actually just having bought Bitcoin when I think at that time it was like, I don't know,
oh,
$4 or $5
I come
a
up with
coin.
Bitcoin, man. So
Yeah.
I'm with you there. With Ethereum specifically, I'll talk about it a little bit more. We've seen Ethereum shoot from, it was $7 in December 2016. Again, like me being short sighted, I was like, see, look how stupid it is, $7. Then it shot up to $400 about 3 weeks ago. And now it's been stabilizing at about $20. Now, there's a lot of reasons for, that run up and like trying to explain it. And people are always attributing things. Fundamentally, I do think Ethereum is valuable technology. But at the same time, almost everybody I've talked to, at meetups and conferences who is buying Ethereum now doesn't know anything about Ethereum.
So
They're
it's
buying,
just speculative.
yeah, and it's not even speculative. They just log into their Coinbase account and they say, oh, Bitcoin's expensive, Ethereum's cheaper. Ethereum could just be the price of Bitcoin someday. That's the one. Like, I'm going to be betting on that.
Mm.
And even if you go just a little bit deeper, Ethereum has a totally different supply schedule. There's 92, 93 million units of Ether in the world today, whereas Bitcoin has about 16.5 million. The inflation rate of Ethereum today is about 10%. So, there's lots of Ethereum being produced every day. And to keep a price of like $400, we need a lot of new people logging into Coinbase and saying, I'm going to buy this at an all-time high, and it's only going to keep going up. It makes it hard for that to be sustainable. The other thing is Ethereum is designed for running smart contracts, which I think is an excellent purpose, and I think they're making great progress, but it's still such an early stage. They're not running any smart contracts, and having a token to run smart contracts that's too expensive to run smart contracts is a pretty shitty way to run a smart contract.
Hmm.
So, Ethereum has no hard cap right now, and for the way I look at it, it looks like there's more reasons to not have a hard cap than to ever have a hard cap. It's not designed to be money,
Right.
even though it could be a very valuable technology.
So
So,
because I think we got into the weeds for a second and may have lost some people as far as using it for contracts. Can you explain that a little bit?
yeah, so Ethereum is designed to be like an unstoppable way to run any software you want. So, like right now, for example, if you're running, say, a website like the Silk Road, you've got to put that on a server somewhere.
Mm.
And if that server's in your backyard, you could be arrested. If that server's on Amazon Web Services, they're probably going to shut you down. However, if you have it totally decentralized and you're paying into this decentralized platform to run your software will run no matter what, as long as you're still paying enough ether and gas into this contract. So I think that's a phenomenal idea
Hmm.
that could, have that totally new open degree of freedom on the internet. And I think some of the earliest use cases for smart contracts will just be stuff like sports bets, right? I mean, that's the easiest contract. Like the Packers will win by 7, and if they don't, then money goes here or money goes there. And you're seeing those sort of simple rollouts. Way more exciting would be running, say, the entire company Airbnb on a smart contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
have reputation management and data storage and matching people and money. And instead of being on a big server bank in Palo Alto somewhere, it's on this global decentralized computing platform. But we're still so far away from that. The network has to be so much bigger to support that level of computing power. And that's years. It's years into the future. It needs to be iteratively built out, and it is being iteratively built out right now. They'll do one smart contract. Like the DAO was an example, and then it got hacked. Like, oh well, that doesn't work, so you have to try something else.
Hmm.
And they're making progress, but that progress can only be iterative. And people right now are banking on it like it's already running like a Netflix or an Airbnb on this platform. And right now it's not. It's just speculative trading. There's been a lot of interest too because you have something called the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, where a lot of banks and consulting firms say, "Hey, like Ethereum, that's a great blockchain. We'll research it." And I think it's just because it has great branding. It's a great thing to package and sell to your consulting clients and be like, "Oh, you want blockchain? Here it is. We can do it for you." The problem with that is, I think you either have enterprise Ethereum or you have true free decentralized computing, right? Do you
Right.
think Deloitte's going to be using Ethereum if somebody's running a Silk Road on the same platform? Absolutely not. That's another risk with Ethereum is there's perceived greater centralization, because they have this corporate influence and because they have this speculative influence that might shape the software they choose to support. I don't really think that's a risk as much as some people do, but the fact remains like it could happen.
Mhm.
Whereas Bitcoin, you have this whole army of people trying to make anything happen, and it's just slapping them in the face. So they're very different value propositions and investments. I do like Ethereum. I struggle to see how it commands such a high price, especially with such high inflation, that I think the price is mostly supported now by so many people logging in and saying it's cheaper. It's cheaper. It's not really that much cheaper. So my advice on altcoins in general: do your homework. Like there are some exciting altcoins.
Mhm.
I think anything with a niche use in the digital scarcity space that's not covered by Bitcoin will create wealth and will create value, and has indeed already. But it is a lot. It is a lot riskier. This is what your risk appetite is, and please don't be one of the people, like so many people talking to me now. They're like, "Oh, hey, like this new one just came out and it's only this, but it's definitely going to do this. Like, should I get it? Maybe. I don't know. That's up to you. Like I'm on a personal moratorium on any crypto token that I don't know what's going on. So another, like you were saying, Dash, another unique use case that's different from Bitcoin right now
Mhm.
is these privacy coins. So Dash, and there's a number of things about Dash that are different from Bitcoin. So I'm still oversimplifying, but one of the things is it has anonymous transactions. So with Bitcoin, I guess I have to rewind a bit here too. Transactions are pseudonymous. So if I send you Bitcoin, anybody can see on the blockchain that an amount of Bitcoin. They can say, "Oh, one Bitcoin went from this address to this other address."
Right. Yeah.
They won't know who has those addresses, but with big data, with the amount of like people like the NSA, the amount of data that they can process,
Right.
people could figure that out. Like even today, if you have a Coinbase account and you try to send money from your Coinbase account to an online gambling site, you will get an email immediately. They will say, "Hey, like cease and desist. We know what you're doing." So you need to manage your own privacy with Bitcoin, and you can, but you do need to manage it. With Dash, the idea is you can have transactions that are sent in a way that is more anonymous. And I'm actually personally not that familiar with Dash. I just know it's one of the competing protocols for that. There's one called Zcash that offers something similar. But with Zcash, it's a little weird because your anonymous transactions are optional. So, if you're using a network that doesn't have a lot of users and you're sending anonymous transactions, like how many Zcash users are there in the world, and then how many Zcash users are sending anonymous transactions? Like it's not that anonymous. People know you're a Zcash user sending anonymous transactions. It's a very small bucket to
Yeah.
pick from. Monero is personally my favorite privacy coin. And again, like I'm biased on all of these. Like I have Ethereum, I have Monero, I have Bitcoin. So like I'll always be talking up the things that I have. But I like Monero because it's been around longer than a lot of the other privacy coin solutions. Dash has been around a little bit longer, but it's rebranded and changed so many times that I don't really count it.
Hmm.
And Monero is just natively anonymous. You don't have the choice to send a non-anonymous transaction to Monero. Everything you send is anonymous. But with Monero it is the worst user experience of any cryptocurrency right now. Like you have to be running a command line node on your laptop, and
Oh
you have to be
God.
typing in, like ridiculous character strings. My friends and I joke about it all the time. Like I don't even know how much Monero I have, or like if it's still there. Like I got to fire up like a couple hours of process something and check it. But the important thing is that it has a use case in the digital scarcity space that's slightly distinct from Bitcoin. So there's reason to believe it could carve out a larger market cap.
Mhm.
And you said like Dash has done that. Dash went from like $17 to something like $200 today,
Hmm.
in my view, for almost no reason. Although Dash Dash is a really interesting PR machine because it's actually in the protocol that people who own Dash and these things called masternodes can vote to use mined Dash to fund Dash. So you get situations where like you'll be at a Bitcoin conference and they'll have like a Dash bikini babe walking around, and it's just because a bunch of developers everywhere in the world said like we should get a Dash bikini babe at this conference and made it happen. And then people are like, what's going on here? But it's really innovative, and
Yes.
humans and money, like maybe that's one of the best ways to do it.
Yes.
Uh, but there's
That's
all these
funny.
kind of distinct niches. So Dash,
Yeah.
its market cap has gone up quite substantially. Monero, I think, is one of the privacy coins that you haven't seen that yet.
Hmm.
Like even Zcash went from like $40 to $400 and crashed immediately, and now it's somewhere I think around $200. But people have been speculating on this privacy use case, and I don't think that speculation has gotten to Monero yet because it's so user unfriendly.
Hmm.
So that's the level of analysis you need to do, though. If you want to get into altcoins, you can't be like, oh yeah, like this new money coin or like this new like Baller coin or Filecoin. Like it has a compelling use case. I saw a press release for something called Dentacoin, and it just had a picture of like a dentist in a coat, and it was like, hey, dentists have a lot of money. Shouldn't they have a coin? You can invest in Dentacoin. I was
What
like,
the hell?
okay, like, and people have been buying that stuff. So you need to do a basic level of due diligence.
Hmm.
And the thing about this is the internet has so much more information about cryptocurrencies than you could ever hope to get about a stock. Like there really is still today, like there's insider information on cryptocurrencies. It's not insider, it's publicly available.
Mm.
It's just so few people know about it. Like I personally don't do any day trading. Like I don't think I'm smart enough, but people have had success just with like watching Google Trends. They're like, oh, more people are googling Ethereum, like it's probably going to go up, and like it does. Now, like that only works until it doesn't, and like I
Yeah.
don't. But you're still dealing with such a small and illiquid market that people do these kind of things. Or people write bots that say monitor Google Trends and then make these trades based on this. And
Wow.
there's just you don't have to take too many steps
Mm.
to become more of an expert than a lot of people in the space on the different cryptocurrencies you choose.
Mm.
My advice would be like, empirical experience is the best measure of a coin's worth. Very few of these coins in the future are going to do what Ethereum did and do what Bitcoin did, because when Bitcoin and Ethereum came out, it was still up in the air whether cryptocurrencies were a thing. Is there
Yeah.
going to be a digital scarcity space, or is this all going to get hacked and disappear? Risk was priced in. And that risk now is not priced in, right? People are like, okay, cryptocurrencies exist. Like this is the price level. So people thinking they're going to get into some like new ICO for like a couple of pennies and it's going to be worth as much as Bitcoin someday. Why? There has to be some compelling technical reason why it can be worth that much as a percentage of digital scarcity. And that compelling reason to me, it has to have a unique use case that other cryptocurrencies that have been around for longer are not meeting for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to find its niche. So, what would you say? There's plenty of people out there that are like, this cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, it's all a bubble and it's just going to blow up and people are going to lose all their money. How do you react to that?
Yeah, like people are going to lose a ton of money in cryptocurrency. It's really risky. So Bitcoin grows in a cascading series of bubbles. It's you're having this technology empirically proven out, and the more value is being stored by it, like you're testing it at a new value level, and it needs new security and new usability and new features to support that value level. So, Bitcoin went from $1 to $30 and back to $2 and, back up to $100 and then went from 100 to 200 back to 100. I mean, I'm missing the bubbles, but if you look at the price history of Bitcoin, it's always been a bubble and a crash and a bubble and a crash. And the crash is always back to an all-time high. So it's just this weird psychological dynamic. And, I don't really buy into technical analysis or all of those things, but the way Bitcoin works, because it's still not heavily traded, people will get onto it. They'll see, oh, the price is going up, and you'll get more momentum from that, and it'll keep going up. And then people will log into their Bitcoin wallet and be like, oh, holy crap, I just made all this money. I need to sell. And then you'll have a retreat, and then the price starts going down, and then people start panic selling, and it goes back down. But I think that'll keep happening. The volatility of Bitcoin has been going down in the long term, and I also think that will continue to happen. In the extreme long term, I think Bitcoin is still incredibly undervalued. It's an investment in Bitcoin, I'd say, is a bet that the technology is anti-fragile and resistant to all of the challenges that it's going to face. If you look at market cap, I think that's way more relevant than price, right? People get caught up in the price. The point of Bitcoin is that it's an alternative to the existing financial system in the same way that gold and silver are. And it has unique advantages over gold and silver and some disadvantages compared to gold and silver. But no matter what the price is, it will exist and work like that.
Hmm.
In terms of the price, that I think market cap is more relevant than saying, oh, it's $2,500 per 1.0 BTC. 1.0 BTC is a total arbitrary amount. 21 million is a totally arbitrary amount. Market cap today is about $40 billion. That's a metric of saying, hey, like this pretty heavily traded asset now is storing and securing about $40 billion worth of value.
Mm.
Now, compare that to some other assets, like the Swiss franc. There's about 8 million users of the Swiss franc in the population of Switzerland. And now, of course, it has international users and things like that. But the market cap of the Swiss franc is about $1 trillion. And that's just pieces of paper backed up by, halls and robes and costumes and PhDs that people trust who happen to be in the mountains of Central Europe. That's all it is. That's all it is. And you have $1 trillion being secured by that system and 8 million or so users. And Bitcoin right now, it's not dependent on trust. It's dependent on empirical history and a balance between stakeholders and open source and the ability to change and evolve. And it has, there's all sorts of estimates of how many users Bitcoin has right now. I'd say Coinbase has about 9 million users today. And another popular wallet, blockchain.info, has about 15 million users today. So I'm sure not all of those accounts are active, but you're looking at 15 to 25 million users in Bitcoin and a market cap of $40 billion, compared to the Swiss franc with, potentially lower users and $1 trillion, just 25 times the market cap for this paper money that's only one paper money among, hundreds of different paper money systems. So every time Bitcoin starts growing, it starts eating up and like overtaking some of these fiat currencies. Right now, there are, I think, more than 50 fiat currencies where Bitcoin has a higher market cap. Now, it's not that impressive that it has a higher market cap than, whatever they're using in Congo or whatever. But the trajectory, right? You're betting on the vector. And the longer Bitcoin continues to survive and continues to grow and continues to outperform these paper currencies, I'd say the more likely it is to continue to survive and to continue to grow, continue to outperform those paper currencies. Gold's market cap is around 8 trillion or so in terms of all mined gold in the world, at the current market price. And Bitcoin has a lot of similar use cases to gold and a lot of, crossover appeal to some of the same people. If you're looking at just 10% of gold's market cap, you're already 20 times the price. You're already looking at $40,000 for one BTC. But again, that's arbitrary because you can still buy $10 of Bitcoin. You can still send $15 of Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if the Bitcoin price is 1,000 or 10,000. You can still send $1 million using Bitcoin, or $5
because it's fractional. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. We've talked about people doing their homework a lot, and of course, there is a lot to keep up with here. And you have a bunch of sites, but you have your blog, bitesofman.com. What sort of mischief do you get up over there?
So I started that blog just to collect some of my thoughts about Bitcoin and what I see as a broader political trend away from debt-based money. And what does eliminating debt-based money mean for humans? And is there going to be this flight to non-debt-based money now that the door's finally open? And what are the implications of that? Now, of course, most people don't give a damn about any of those things. So I write it mostly for communities who do, which is like my friends or people I'll send emails to. My most recent post, though, relevant to what we're talking about, I called it the baby boomer case for Bitcoin.
Okay.
There was a couple of, like my parents' friends are like, oh, hey, like you basically dedicated your life to Bitcoin. Like you left ExxonMobil to like work for Bitcoin.com. So like, is it kind of serious? Maybe I should invest. And for them, like $10,000 into Bitcoin might have been like nothing. So I just said, hey, like I wrote out pretty much 1,000-word email. Like, here are the fundamentals. Here's how much money has been invested into this system by how many people. And here's where I think it can go and why. And of course, they didn't invest. And that was when it was like $900. Then it almost immediately shot, 3,000, now at 2,500. So I felt very smug about that, even though I haven't gotten back to rub it in or anything. It's a good piece. Like that's a great just introduction to the investment case for Bitcoin. It's a very user friendly prospectus, especially for people who are experienced investors but very frustrated. Right now everything's overpriced. Equities are overpriced, real estate's overpriced, everything's nuts. Like, what the hell is this totally new asset class? I talk about that a lot and what some of those implications are.
If listeners go there today and sign up for it and start hanging out and start following all the wacky goodness that is Joey, how often are they in for a treat?
So I've been posting about once a month, but I'm looking to start up a daily newsletter just about cryptocurrency, what I think these trends are, what's happening in the industry, what some of these people are up to, how I think this stuff will play out. Not as like an investment advice. For me, again, it's more about an alternative to today's financial system and what the implications of that alternative are. So, I love gold. I have gold. I have silver. I see Bitcoin as something that can work with that and has a lot of overlap and solves a lot of the same problems. But it solves it in different ways. So I focus a lot on those distinctions. What are some of the advantages of Bitcoin over gold or precious metals over Bitcoin or anything over the Federal Reserve? And what does that actually mean, like in your life, if you're in the West and trying to use your financial resources or have control over your financial resources?
Well, awesome stuff, man. Tell us the website address one more time.
That's bytesofman.com. So BYTES, computer bytes, bytesofman.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joey. I appreciate having you on.
Yeah, no problem.
A quick important note. Double check your feed for a follow-up episode to this one. We did a quick follow-up episode to cover what changed since this episode was recorded. We wanted to make sure y'all were covered and understood everything. Show notes, links, and resources from this episode can be found at intherabbithole.com/E220. Get your gun and get it shipped for free for a limited time when you use the promo code RABBITHOLE during checkout at martinarmory.com. Support the show and get more survival goodness. Visit itrh.net. Again, that's itrh.net. From the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.